Back, my fellow questioners, chroniclers of the cryptic and collectors of the controversy, to another brain-breaking broadcast of Conspiracy Unearthed. I am Apollo von Aryx, your sarcasm-slinging sentinel, your decoder of the damned, your late-night narrator of all things they don't want you to know. I want to dedicate this episode of Conspiracy Unearthed to a dear friend of mine who passed away at the start of the pandemic. Scat, wherever you are in the universe, my dear friend, this one is for you and your immense love for the giants. Tonight, we traverse a tale as old as time, yet erased from textbooks, temples, and timelines. Giants, watchers, the forbidden fusions of gods and mortals, from Genesis to genetic code, from megaliths to metadata. We unravel the Nephilim connection and ask the question that curdles every comfortable narrative. What if they never vanished? What if they evolved, infiltrated, and inherited? This isn't just myth. It's a map, a blood-soaked breadcrumb trail through government cover-ups, corporate genetic cartels, and clandestine councils. Now, before we dig into today's episode, a little disclaimer. My mission here isn't to tell you what to believe. I'm not here to debunk or endorse any particular conspiracy. I'm just laying it all out there, examining every angle, diving into the text, the stories, the ancient ruins. I'm just looking for those thought-provoking connections. You know, those nuggets of insight that make you go, I never really thought of it that way. So, fasten your frontal lobes, fire up your filters of discernment, and prepare for the forbidden. Because once you hear this, you'll never look at humanity the same way again. The Smithsonian Institution, a temple of learning, a bastion of science. Or is it? What if I told you that this venerable institution, this supposed gatekeeper of knowledge, was hiding something so big, so earth-shattering, that it could rewrite the story of humanity itself? That's right, folks. Today, we're talking giants. Biblical, mythological, bone-rattling giants. And guess what? The Smithsonian may have been playing the role of the cleanup crew for the past 100 years. Now, before you roll your eyes, let's rewind to the late 19th century, a time when America was wild, the frontier was vast, and people were digging up things they maybe shouldn't have been. Enter the burial mounds of the Midwest. Ohio, Wisconsin, Tennessee, you name it. Farmers, treasure hunters, and amateur archaeologists stumbled upon skeletons so large they'd make your local basketball team look like hobbits. Skeletal remains towering 9, 10, 12 feet tall were found in ancient burial sites alongside mysterious artifacts and intricate tools. Reports flooded newspapers, some even gracing the pages of the New York Times. Yes, the New York Times, back when it had fewer filters and a lot more nerve. But here's where things get weird. Every time these giants were found, in came the Smithsonian. Like a white-gloved cleaner in the dead of night, they swooped in, confiscated the bones, and poof! Those skeletons were never seen again. Were they locked away in the basement of the National Museum, tossed into the Potomac, ground into bone dust? Who knows? What we do know is that these discoveries conveniently disappeared, and with them, any challenge to the official story of human history. Let's set the stage. In the 19th century, the American Midwest was practically one giant archaeological dig. Farmers, adventurers, and even school teachers stumbled upon vast burial mounds. thousands of them, scattered across Ohio, Indiana, and beyond. Inside, artifacts, bones, and giants. We're talking 8 to 12 feet tall. Reports appeared in newspapers across the country, from the St. Louis Democrat to the New York Times. And then, like a fart in the wind, the evidence vanished. Enter the Smithsonian Institution. Founded in 1846 under the pretense of increasing and diffusing knowledge, it quickly became the gatekeeper of historical truth in America. And as it turns out, they were very selective about which truths they wanted to diffuse. According to researcher and author Richard J. Dewhurst, the Smithsonian received hundreds of giant skeletons and allegedly destroyed them. Dewhurst's book, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, catalogs over 1,500 newspaper clippings and field reports detailing these anomalous remains. "Oh, Apollo," the skeptics cry, "you're just falling for tabloid journalism." Sure, except that many of those reports came from respected newspapers in the 1800s, often backed by affidavits and testimonies from town officials, academics, even clergy. But here's the real kicker. The Smithsonian has never offered a clear public accounting of the remains they received during those years. No catalog, no skeletons on display, no digital archives, just silence. Convenient, ain't it? Especially when you consider that the Smithsonian was working alongside the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in, mapping mound sites. Government meets science. Science meets narrative control. All in the name of progress. Or was it suppression? According to whistleblowers and leaked memos uncovered by Dewhurst, giant skeletons were systematically destroyed in the early 20th century to protect Darwinian orthodoxy and keep religious upheaval at bay. Because if the Nephilim were real, if beings of immense size, strength, and mysterious origin walked this earth, what would that do to our tidy timelines, to our evolutionary story? Genesis 6:4 calls them the mighty men of old. The Book of Enoch says they were the spawn of watchers, fallen angels who mated with mortal women. And if that's true, then the Smithsonian isn't just hiding bones, they're hiding proof that humanity once shared the earth with hybrids. Don't take my word for it. Ask the native tribes, the Choctaw, the Paiute, the Cherokee. They all tell stories of pale giants covered in armor, wielding weapons too large for any man. The Paiute warred with red-haired cannibal giants in the Lovelock Caves. What was found in those caves? Massive sandals, oversized handprints, and yes, elongated skulls. Remains that disappeared once authorities got involved again. Still not convinced? Let's talk about the infamous 2014 viral article claiming the Smithsonian admitted to destroying giant skeletons. Fact checkers called it satire, and technically, it was. But why did that story go viral in the first place? Because it struck a nerve. Because the idea we've been lied to about our origins doesn't feel absurd, it feels familiar. And satire, as always, thrives on uncomfortable truths. So, what happens when you bury truth under marble floors and academic tenure? you get a nation that forgets its giants, a species that shrinks its own history to fit within politically palatable timelines, and a generation that thinks the supernatural is just science fiction. But truth has weight, and bones, especially big ones, are hard to keep buried forever. This isn't about proving that giants were real. It's about proving that somebody believed they were real, that institutions took active steps to make sure the public never saw the evidence. And in a world of government-funded museums and official history, omission is the deadliest lie of all. So, what do we do with this? We follow the trail. Because bones rot, but blood doesn't lie. Next, we step into the world of genetic code, where the Nephilim may not be gone, just hidden in our DNA. The bones may be gone, but blood remembers. And coming up next, what happens when science starts uncovering the whispers buried in our DNA? From Cro-Magnon to Neanderthal to something far older. We're cracking the genetic code of giants. You're going to want to hear this. They say history is written by the victors. But in the age of biotech, history isn't just written. It's sequenced, sampled, and uploaded. The bones may be gone, but the blood remembers. Let's open the file marked genetic anomalies and ask ourselves a very uncomfortable question. Are the Nephilim walking among us right now? Let's start with the basics. Modern humans are not genetically pure. We carry fragments of other species. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and a few more we haven't even named yet. Not to mention, we share a lot of alleles with a lot of animals. A 2010 study from the Max Planck Institute confirmed that non-Africans have up to 2% Neanderthal DNA. In Melanesian populations, up to 6% Denisovan. Now, these numbers may sound small, but they're not decorative. I mean, these fragments affect our immune system, brain development, even the way we metabolize food. In short, the ghosts of ancient species live in our blood. Now, what if there's something else? A genetic residue that doesn't belong to anything on the conventional evolutionary chart. Something that doesn't match Neanderthals or Homo sapiens or Denisovans, but isn't quite alien either. Something hybrid. That's where the Nephilim come in. Described in Genesis 6:4 as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. They weren't just myth. They were an invasive genetic event. A divine contamination, if you will. So, here's the twist. If they existed, and the ancients said they did, then their DNA wouldn't have just disappeared. That's not how genetics works. DNA doesn't care about theological taboos. It lingers. It slips into recessive genes. It reemerges under the right conditions. And it hides best in plain sight. Elite families, royal bloodlines, isolated populations where endogamy preserves unusual traits. Let's talk about the Basques. You've heard of them. An ancient group in northern Spain with an obscure language and a genetic profile that baffles researchers. They're one of the only European groups not to carry Indo-European markers. Geneticists like Stephen Oppenheimer have argued their lineage stretches back to the Ice Age. But here's what gets me. They also exhibit unique markers in mitochondrial DNA, markers linked to height, resistance to certain diseases, and increased cranial capacity. remind you of anyone? Coincidence, the skeptics scoff. Oh, always. Like the odd fact that the European royal families, especially those that intermarried for generations, carry disproportionate rates of Marfan syndrome, a disorder that causes, wait for it, tall stature, elongated limbs, and distinct facial structures. If you were trying to preserve a Nephilim bloodline, wouldn't you want traits like that coded into your dynasty? Now enter the modern genetic testing companies: 23andMe, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage. Millions of people have spit in a tube and mailed their code to corporate labs in the last 10 years. And who owns that data now? Well, in 2020, BlackRock acquired Ancestry.com. That's right. Our friends from the finance world. The same BlackRock we'll talk more about in segment 3. But let me pose this. If you had access to global genetic data and you knew what Nephilim DNA looked like, wouldn't you want to find it? And here's the rub. In 2019, Harvard researchers mapped DNA samples from 26 globally isolated populations and found anomalies, genetic traits with no clear evolutionary origin, some linked to unexpected muscle development, bone density, and height. The data was dismissed, quietly reframed as archaic admixture. But ask yourself, if it was Nephilim DNA, would they even tell us? Even the Vatican has weighed in, quietly of course. Tucked away in Vatican Library archives are references to the Book of Enoch, long considered heretical. That book, you'll recall, details the Watchers, divine beings who mated with human women and sired the Nephilim. Early church fathers debated its inclusion in canon, then decided to bury it, suppressed. Coincidence again? Or an early effort to bury genetic truth before it could rise from the dust? The takeaway in this, the blood never lies. Somewhere deep in our double helix, the Nephilim still whisper. In elite families, in genetic anomalies, in unexplainable traits passed through quiet lineages, the ancient hybrid story isn't dead, it's encrypted. And every time someone mails in their DNA to a corporate database, we get one step closer to decoding it. So, who's doing the decoding? Who has access to the ancient code? In segment 3, we follow the money to BlackRock, to the World Economic Forum, and to the shadowy financiers who may be using your DNA to resurrect the bloodlines of gods and monsters. Strap in. The game is no longer about ancestry. It's about inheritance. So now that we know the code may still be out there, the question becomes, who's looking for it? And what do they want with it? Up next, we follow the money, the mergers, and the machine learning. BlackRock enters the chat, and trust me, they're not after your family tree. They're after your inheritance. You know, there's a saying in Silicon Valley, if the product is free, you're the product. But what if you paid for the privilege of being sold? Millions of people have already done it. Spit into a tube, mailed it off, and let corporations catalog their DNA. But this isn't just about who your great-grandfather married or whether you've got Viking blood. No. This is about what's hiding in your blood. And more importantly, who wants to find it. Let's talk about BlackRock. The name alone sounds like it should be embossed on a secret cabal's letterhead. In 2020, BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, controlling over 10 trillion in global wealth, acquired a controlling stake in Ancestry.com for a smooth $4.7 billion. That wasn't an investment. That was a data grab, a genomic land rush. And because Ancestry doesn't just sell family trees, it stores over 20 million DNA profiles. That's a living archive of the human species. And now BlackRock owns it. And what does a shadowy mega firm want with your DNA? They're not interested in your Irish heritage, I promise you. What they want are patterns, outliers, lineages with markers that don't add up. Say, inconsistent elevation in growth hormone regulators, or an inherited mutation that thickens bone density, or better yet, signs of a non-human admixture. Now imagine a program running quietly in the background, flagging those genetic anomalies and cross-referencing them against surnames, geography, and, oh yes, wealth. But Apollo, you gasp. Surely no company would use DNA to profile entire families and bloodlines, right? Oh, sweet listener, bless your trusting little mitochondria. Corporations like BlackRock don't just influence economic policy, they shape it. Their CEO, Larry Fink, meets regularly with world leaders. He's a top advisor to central banks, the UN, and wait for it, the World Economic Forum. You know, the one where Klaus Schwab used to talk about rewriting humanity through Fourth Industrial Revolution. Yeah, that forum. And speaking of Schwab, this guy actually said on camera that the future is not just happening, it is being shaped by us. Us, of course, meaning the ultra-wealthy technocrats who see humanity not as sacred, but as editable. Schwab's dream? A society of augmented humans, controlled through biotech, surveillance, and social credit systems. But why build a superhuman when you could find one hiding in the genome? What if Nephilim blood didn't vanish? It just drifted into obscurity, waiting for someone with enough computing power to rediscover it. And here's where things get really weird. Because several isolated aristocratic bloodlines show exactly the kinds of genetic anomalies that would fit a Nephilim adjacent profile. Tall stature, rare immunity profiles, elongated facial structure, rapid wound healing. Some researchers like Dr. Ellen Armstrong, a medical anthropologist out of Geneva, have openly theorized that these traits aren't random, but evidence of selective breeding across generations, not for aesthetics, but for inheritance. Want some names? Sure. The Habsburgs, you know, the once ruling family of the Holy Roman Empire, had notoriously elongated jawbones, bizarrely tall stature, and kept their bloodlines pure through aggressive inbreeding. Why? Were they simply obsessed with power, or were they trying to preserve something ancient? The Merovingians, a Frankish dynasty, were rumored to be descendants of the Nephilim by occult historians like Lawrence Gardner and Michael Bajan, who connect their bloodline to both Jesus and the Watchers. Then there's the British royals. The House of Windsor shares DNA markers with multiple royal families in Europe, all tracing back to the so-called blue bloods, a term used not just to signify nobility, but possibly oxygen-rich hemoglobin caused by slightly different vascular structure. Myth? Maybe. But blue blood also appears in Sumerian mythology, describing those who came from the stars. What do they know that we don't? Here's the terrifying part. With AI-assisted bioanalytics and machine learning, a company like BlackRock doesn't need to guess. They can find the bloodlines, filter genomes by height, strength, skull shape, and neurological traits. If Nephilim descended genes are out there, BlackRock already knows who has them. And you paid $99 and the shipping to tell them, well done. So let's spell it out. A $1 trillion financial entity now controls a massive human genetic database. Its executives are aligned with world-shaping figures like Klaus Schwab, and those very figures are pushing an agenda of human transformation and controlled evolution. That's not conspiracy. That's a business model. And you, dear listener, are the raw material. So what's next? If they find the Nephilim code, what do they do with it? Do they use CRISPR to reactivate it? Do they clone it? Or do they eliminate the carriers so that no competitor ever has access to that power? The answers may lie not in labs, but in the halls of Davos. In segment 4, we enter the mind of the mastermind himself, Klaus Schwab, and ask whether he's not trying to build the next giants, but resurrect them. The corporations bought your blood, but the blueprints, they're being written in Davos. Coming up, we step into the mind of Klaus Schwab, the man who thinks he can upgrade humanity like a software patch. But what if his grand design isn't for a future race, but a forgotten one? We're crossing into deep water now. Don't blink. If you ever wondered what it would sound like if a Bond villain gave a TED Talk, look no further than Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, orchestrator of the Great Reset, and proud frontman of humanity's most ambitious social experiment. The guy's got the accent, the black turtlenecks, and the obsession with turning you into, well, something else. But here's what they don't want you to ask. What if Schwab isn't trying to create something new at all? What if he's trying to bring something ancient back? Let's rewind to 2016. Schwab takes the Davos stage and says with unsettling confidence that the fourth industrial revolution will lead to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identities. Not metaphorical, biological. This is a man not merely suggesting we upgrade our smartphones. He's pitching a full rewrite of human evolution, gene editing, implantable neural interfaces, all part of the plan. But where does that plan lead? Because let's face it, why stop at fixing disease when you could engineer superiority? Why enhance the average when you could unearth the exceptional? Schwab's books, Reshaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and The Great Narrative, don't just flirt with this idea, they dance with it. Page after page is filled with transhumanist rhetoric, rewriting genomes, improving cognition, extending life. But buried beneath the polished language is something more primal, selective rebirth. And if you get a chance, you should read so you can just see for yourself how much of a Bond villain Klaus Schwab really is. Now ask yourself, how would you identify the building blocks for your new human? You'd need a reference genome, a perfect genome. And where better to look than in those ancient bloodlines, the descendants of giants, of the Watchers. Schwab doesn't need to invent superhumans from scratch. He just needs to find the fragments. The Nephilim code already exists. All he needs is access to the right DNA. And here's where it gets eerie. Schwab's former World Economic Forum isn't just a conference, it's a global command hub. WEF's Young Global Leaders program has groomed, his word, not mine, dozens of heads of state, including Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, Angela Merkel, and yes, even Gavin Newsom and Jacinda Ardern. These aren't politicians. They're installations, strategically positioned to synchronize policy with Schwab's genetic utopia. But Apollo, surely Klaus just wants to help people. Sure, and I'm a 5'11 Nephilim with perfect skin and a 160 IQ. Look deeper. Schwab's WEF partners include Moderna, Pfizer, and the Broad Institute, leaders in mRNA and genome mapping. And while the public thinks these companies are developing vaccines, Schwab and crew are quietly investing in gene targeting systems. For what exactly? Disease or heritage? Let's go darker. WEF literature and speeches from insiders like Yuval Noah Harari repeatedly refer to a post-human species and evolutionary successor to modern Homo sapiens. Harari calls us hackable animals. No soul, no mystery, just code. Replaceable, programmable, disposable. So I ask, if humanity is being replaced, by what? And this is where Nephilim theory re-enters the frame. Not as ancient history, but as future policy. What if Schwab's goal isn't just to evolve us, but to resurrect a forgotten race, a hybrid class with superior traits, physical resilience, intellectual dominance, longevity, built not in Eden, but in Zurich, and selected not by God, but by algorithms and access to databases like, Ancestry.com, which we now know is owned by BlackRock, whose CEO is Schwab's close personal ally. There are rumors, yes, rumors, of closed-door WEF genomic roundtables, meetings where selected scientists, executives, and advisors discuss human enhancement tech not meant for the masses. These aren't tinfoil tales. They've been acknowledged in passing by attendees like Nita Farahany and Dr. Sam Altman. When questioned, they call it future-proofing. I call it selective ascension. This is no longer about convenience. It's not about health care. It's about design. Schwab's dream isn't just to improve humanity. It's to replace it with a curated successor class. And if that class is built from Nephilim descended genetics, then the myths weren't wrong. They were forecasts. And we're living in the era where prophecy and policy have merged. So, what happens next? Do they unveil a new class of rulers, genetically engineered, socially untouchable, and biologically superior? Are the giants returning, not as soldiers, but as CEOs? In segment 5, we pull back the veil on governments, intelligence agencies, and the cover-ups they've orchestrated to keep us distracted, docile, and in the dark. Technocrats may be building the future, but governments have been hiding the past. Next, we uncover the deliberate suppression of ancient truths by the Vatican, the UN, and the good old Smithsonian. Skeletons in closets, try giants in vaults. They buried the truth. Now we're digging it up. Stay sharp. You won't want to miss this. By now, you felt it. The weight of something ancient pressing against the surface of our modern world. Genetic breadcrumbs, suppressed bones, billion-dollar DNA vaults. But what if I told you it all traces back to the most powerful player of all? Not BlackRock, not even the WEF, I'm talking about the people who control your reality. Governments, intelligence agencies, bureaucracies so vast, their greatest strength isn't what they do, but what they erase. Let's start with the United States government. In the early 20th century, Smithsonian archaeologists were routinely dispatched to dig sites across the Midwest, Wisconsin, Ohio, Tennessee. These digs often unearthed giant skeletons, sometimes measuring over 10 feet tall. This isn't fantasy. It's been documented in 19th century newspaper archives, many of which were cited in Richard Dewhurst's The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America. But where are these bones now? According to former Smithsonian insiders, many were quietly disposed of or locked in off-site facilities. No public record, no photos, no follow-up. Why would they hide that? Because if the giants existed, and let's be honest, something was found, it would obliterate the tidy timeline of human evolution. It would validate biblical accounts. Worse still, it would point to the possibility that hybrids, beings not fully human, walked among us. And that opens a door no institution wants kicked open. The FBI, the CIA, even NASA have all been implicated in quietly seizing anomalous findings under the blanket of national security. Take Operation High Jump, 1946. Officially, a U.S. Navy expedition to Antarctica. Unofficially, a classified sweep for ancient structures beneath the ice. Whistleblower claims, most famously, Admiral Richard E. Byrd's diaries, which vanished upon his return, suggest the discovery of a massive underground chambers, unusual artifacts, and humanoid remains. Some accounts describe these beings as tall, pale-skinned, with elongated skulls. Sound familiar? Oh, and guess who was reportedly consulted for analysis in the years following? That's right, the Vatican. Specifically, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, known to have secret archaeological records. Coincidence? Hardly. Vatican archivists have long been accused of suppressing texts like the Book of Enoch, which explicitly describes the Watchers, the fallen angels, and their giant progeny, the Nephilim. If governments and religions are both hiding the same story, it's no longer a theory, it's a strategy. Even the United Nations has dipped its hand into this murky pool. In 2017, internal memos from a UN subcommittee on post-human evolutionary ethics, yes, that's real, discussed genetic outliers and the possibility of inherited cognitive dominance in non-public lineages. The document was leaked to fringe researcher Dr. Edward Mandel, who vanished from academia within months. His final public statement? The bloodlines are being managed. Managed by whom? Then there's the Vatican's Codex Purpureus, a hidden manuscript allegedly recovered in the 1950s, detailing post-flood survivors of the Nephilim. According to Father Sergio Esteban, a defrocked Spanish priest turned whistleblower, the Vatican holds dozens of such documents in its secret archives. Some describe giant kings hidden by royal families. Others map Nephilim descendants through ancient Mesopotamian bloodlines. Still think the papal robes are just about liturgy? And if you think this is just ancient history, think again. Declassified CIA documents from the 1960s refer cryptically to ethnographic anomalies found in the Caucasus region. Individuals with skulls described as dolichocephalic, meaning elongated and unusually dense bone structure. These files were redacted, but one named remain, Operation Noah's Wake. not to be confused with the 2002 Operation Noah's Ark by the Israelis, a genetic mapping project targeting remote highland populations. Does that sound like archaeology to you? So, what do all these operations have in common? Suppression, silent acquisition, denial through obscurity. And why? Because if the Nephilim survived, if their bloodline persists, then the families who carry it aren't just wealthy or powerful. They are chosen, not by democracy, not by economics, but by biology. And the governments of the world, knowing full well the destabilizing power of that knowledge, have chosen to keep it hidden, not for your protection, but for their continuity. Think of it. A secret cast of beings walking among us, hiding in plain sight. CEOs, royals, politicians, immune to common disease, able to wield influence not by merit, but by ancient encoded superiority. Is this why global policy is so allergic to transparency? Because the real power isn't in the ballot box or boardroom, but in the double helix. So now the final question emerges. If these bloodlines exist and governments are protecting them, what happens when they stop hiding? In our final segment, we bring it all home. The Nephilim, the elites, the modern-day architects of a post-human future, and the chilling possibility that the giants aren't coming back because they never left. We followed the cover-ups. Now it's time to connect the dots. Coming up, the final reveal, where myths, science, power, and policy converge. Are the Nephilim walking among us today? The answer may already be in your DNA or theirs. You followed the clues. You've wandered through suppressed skeletons, whispered lineages, billion-dollar DNA deals, and government files buried deeper than any tomb. And now, here we are. At the end of the maze, the question remains, are the Nephilim real? I'm not going to answer that for you, but I will show you that everything we've discussed, every corporate buyout, every Vatican cover-up, every genetic anomaly circles one terrifying possibility. The giants never died. They simply adapted. Let's recap. The Smithsonian, founded to preserve truth, allegedly destroyed hundreds, perhaps thousands of oversized skeletons unearthed across North America. Indigenous legends described pale-skinned giants who ruled the land before the tribes arrived. And those stories, they weren't vague metaphors. They were warnings, oral histories, passed down with chilling consistency across continents. Meanwhile, we've established that modern humans are walking patchworks, genetic hybrids of Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and possibly something else. Traits like accelerated growth, exceptional strength, and disease immunity don't just show up for no reason. And when isolated aristocratic lineages exhibit those traits generation after generation, it's not evolution, it's preservation. Oh, Apollo, the fact-checkers sigh. That's just royal inbreeding. Sure, and blue blood is just a metaphor, except it isn't. Because when ancient Sumerian texts and Vatican confiscated scrolls describe rulers whose blood was not of this earth, and when BlackRock pays billions to mine DNA while working hand in glove with the WEF's transhumanist agenda, we're no longer talking coincidence. We're talking continuity. The real revelation? The Nephilim never needed to return. They've been here all along. Quietly ruling, not by force, but by design. Generation after generation, bloodline after bloodline, from Babylon to Rome, from the Holy Roman Empire to modern constitutional monarchies, from oil tycoons to biotech billionaires, each carrying with them not just a legacy, but a genetic mandate. And today, With technology reaching the point where anyone can sequence DNA, those bloodlines are suddenly vulnerable. Or are they? Is it a coincidence that BlackRock now owns the world's largest DNA database? That governments are outlawing certain kinds of genetic research? That powerful figures like Klaus Schwab are actively pursuing the merger of human and machine, right as forgotten traits begin to resurface? And what about us? The rest of humanity, the 99.9% who don't carry these ancient codes. Are we merely passengers on a vessel being steered by bloodline inheritors? Or worse, are we the experiment, the controlled class, the clay, waiting to be shaped into something new, while the old ones prepare to reclaim their place atop the pyramid? Because let's not forget, this isn't just about past power. It's about future ascendancy. If a post-human world is coming, if transhumanism is the next step, then someone will choose who evolves and who gets left behind. And who better to lead that charge than those who've already survived one genetic extinction? And maybe, just maybe, this was the plan all along. The flood, Babel, Atlantis, cataclysms designed not to end the Nephilim, but to scatter and dilute their blood, to hide them until we were ready to find them again, until we built the machines and decoded the genes and turned the myth back into a manual. So here we are, at the edge of revelation. The evidence isn't a single skull, or a headline, or a laboratory. It's a pattern, a through line woven through time, power, and genome, a whisper in your ancestry report, a shadow in your family tree, a tall stranger with old money and no paper trail. The Nephilim weren't wiped out. They weren't a myth. They were a beginning. And whether they walk among us as CEOs, kings, or quietly engineered descendants in biotech labs, one thing is clear. The giants never fell. They simply stepped aside and waited. Maybe the elites don't just run the world. Maybe they were born to. Maybe what we call progress is just prophecy playing out in real time. And maybe, just maybe, the real threat isn't what they're building, but what they're trying to bring back. Because the next age of man, it won't be ruled by elections, economies, or even ideologies. It'll be ruled by blood. The question is it yours? This is Conspiracy Unearthed. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And remember, stay curious, stay critical, and never stop questioning. This is Apollo Von Aryx, signing off.
The views, discussions, and narratives presented in Conspiracy Unearthed are strictly for entertainment and educational purposes only. All statements made by the host, Apollo Von Aryx, are opinions, hypothetical analysis, or speculative commentary based on public information, mythologies, historical interpretation, and widely circulated theories. The podcast does not claim factual accuracy, and no assertion made should be interpreted as a statement of fact. The inclusion of any individual organization, government, corporation, or institution in this content does not imply guilt, involvement, or endorsement. All persons and entities mentioned are presumed innocent of any wrongdoing, and their mention is part of a broader theoretical framework meant to encourage critical thinking, not to defame, misrepresent, or slander. Conspiracy Unearthed, its host Apollo Von Aryx, its creators, production team, and any distribution platforms assume no liability or responsibility for how the content is interpreted, shared, or acted upon by any listener. Listeners understand that this content may explore controversial or sensitive topics, and discretion is strongly advised. Audio discretion is advised.